This seminar is on design thinking framework. There are two broad questions we will be addressing in this presentation. One is, how do great innovations such as in music, technology, or science, or industrial design, how do they originate? Or what about business innovations? And secondly, is it possible to come up with a systematic approach for facilitating such innovations? That is an interesting question. So first is, where do such great innovations originate? Secondly, can I come up with a systematic approach for facilitating business innovations? Okay, design thinking idea specifically refers to business innovations. So we start by looking at some great creators. Before that, we will look at the learning outcomes. What are the learning outcomes? As an educator, as the presenter, what is it that I want you to live with? At the end of this talk, what is it that I want you to have grasped? One is a good grasp of the idea and framework of design thinking. Of course, I am sure, or I hope that you will develop that. Second is to reflect further and continuously. This is, as an educator especially, this is something that I always emphasize to my students. The reflection, the process of reflection in your professions, in our lives, that is very, very important. That can make a lot of difference to the way we do things. And thirdly, and most desirably, positive changes in approach to profession. By profession, I mean many of your for students, your studies. So can your approach to studies become hopefully more holistic at the end of this talk? Hopefully. So these are all the desired learning outcomes that the instructor has in mind. So as I said, we will start with looking at some outstanding creators. I'm sure, I mean, all of you or most of you would recognize this Maestro Ilayaraja, one of the greatest Indian music composers. Right? He's a creator, right? And who is this? Ramanujan. Ramanujan, who the Scientific American described as an intuitive genius. Mathematician Ramanujan. And then Michael Faraday, one of the greatest experimental philosophers of all times. And those of us in electrical engineering or chemical engineering, I'm sure we would have read about him, we would have used his equations and concepts, right? And also some noteworthy industrial designers. This is Johnny Ive, who was chief design officer at Apple, and he is the man behind iMac, the most popular products such as iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad. And he is currently the Chancellor of Royal College of Art, London. And in fact, in this name of this institution, Royal College of Art. So he was a designer, and this institute brings together art and design. Okay? Johnny Ive. And Dieter Rams, another noteworthy industrial designer, who he has, to his credit, over 400 products, including portable transistor, razor, universal shelving system, and so on. Okay. And okay, so we have looked at some individual terrific creators in music, mathematics, science, industrial design. We also look at most innovative technology companies. And of course, whenever we talk of most innovative technology companies or organizations, there are a number of lists available. This is a list based on Patent Analytics published in 2019. But anyway, most of these companies are very well known: Microsoft, Apple, IBM, Samsung, Johnson & Johnson, and so on. So most innovative tech companies. Now, so having looked at some of the greatest individual creators, industrial designers, and companies, can we try to decipher creative ability? How is it that these people or these organizations have been able to be so terribly creative? Okay, so first approach will be, what we will do, we will look up to the masters. We will ask them. Okay, so let us say Ilayaraja. I don't know how many of you have followed his interviews and all. Ilayaraja has often said music flows there is divinity in that. It is because of mercy of God that he is able to compose terrific tunes, right? And if you look at Ramanujan, he did not have formal training in pure mathematics. And not just that, as we know, he came up with theorems in dreams, right? So interesting. And if you look at Michael Faraday, again, he did not have formal education. But despite that, these people have been or were tremendously, innovative people. And this is as far as individuals. So if I look up to the masters, I am not able to get anything from the masters themselves as to how is it that they are able to come up with excellent innovations. Okay, then coming to companies, Tim Brennan, he at a conference in 1990 on the activities of Apple's Creative Services Group, he at a conference he said, someone calls with a project, we do some stuff and money flows. This is an extremely illustrative representation he used to represent the situation. The question was, how was it that Apple was able to come up with the creative products? His answer was this. So this is on the left hand side, you see the opportunity. Someone gives a project and money flows. The intervening process is a squiggle. You see, it is a complex loop. Okay, quite complex, very complicated loop. So this is the process, creative process. So which means it can't be easily understood. So now, having considered all this, we can take two possible stands. The first stand, which is probably the easiest to take, is to assume that exceptional organizational or individual creativity is magical. It's not for everyone. No, that is a magic. We don't understand. Look at Raja, Faraday, Ramanujan, or Apple's, Tim Brennan's statement. We don't make out anything about as to how terrific creativity flows. But then if we make this assumption, we don't gain confidence, isn't it? We give up and we feel happy with status quo, right? And obviously, though we might be making some small progress, incremental progress, we don't substantially progress because we assume that that is not for us, right? So this is one stance. Obviously, that is not a very positive stand to take. Second stand is, okay, can we perhaps try to deconstruct great creativity? Can I untangle this squiggle that I saw in the previous slide? Can I make sense out of all this by looking at how organizations have been running? Can I make sense out of this and then try to come up with an approach to systematize creativity? That approach is, it helps us make an effort, and hopefully in that process of making effort, we definitely will become more confident and undoubtedly we become better, is it not? It is all efforts. When we put in efforts, we become better. And then if all of us put in efforts like that, it can lead to a wider presence of excellence, wider presence of creative outcomes. So therefore, obviously, I'm sure you will agree with me that the sensible thing to do is to try to deconstruct great business innovations. We are not talking of individual innovations, that is far more complex, right? So we are looking at business innovations in this. How do we do that? Again, we start by looking at the features of innovative companies. So innovative companies we have considered. So or excellent organizations, institutions, you take any, set of excellent institutions, we will agree that there will be common features that characterize these institutions, is it not? So according to this Harvard Business Review report, the features of innovative companies are employees that think like innovators. See, I'm sure we all appreciate that an organization is its employees, right? An organization is not just building and resources. Resources, of course, human resources. People are the organization. And a shared definition of innovation, right? So all of us, most of us think that, oh, this is what we need to do. So if different people considered innovation or defined innovation differently, then we would all be moving in different directions, and with the result that the net movement will be may at best be incremental, not substantial, as we said earlier. So in a greatly innovative company, employees have a shared definition of innovation. It is like vision. Vision has to be shared, we say, right? Vision of an organization. And of course, accountable and capable innovation leaders and innovation friendly management processes. In fact, if you see this, all these go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, right? These are all linked. So these are features of innovative companies. And if we consider the perspectives of great designers, we will look at, for example, Dieter Rams. We said he, to his credit, has 400 products plus. What has he said on good design? Under two categories, he listed the desirable features of good design under category of helpful and thoughtful. Words, nice words, right? Under helpful, he listed useful. Of course, a product has to be useful. Innovative, then only it will have business value, right? Honest, no deception involved. Long lasting, and therefore environment friendly. Long lasting and therefore environment friendly. So these are all some of the characteristics that good products or good design must meet. This is under the sort of helpful category. And under thoughtful, aesthetic. See, the aesthetics of, that is where the art, right? So aesthetics is important. Aesthetic product, understandable. The project should not be, artificial complexity should not be thrown in. So a product has to be understandable, unobtrusive, related. It shouldn't be very complicated, thorough, as little design as possible. Simplicity. Okay. So subsequently also we'll be telling something about simplicity. So these are all the features of good design according to Dieter Rams. I'm sure most of us would agree. And the popularity of iPhones, though I'm not a user of iPhone, but the people would agree, those users. And not only iPhone, many, even universal shelving system. Yesterday I looked at a video on that. Very interesting. You please do watch that. Very interesting, that design, very interesting consideration. And what is it that John Ivey has said about design philosophy? There is profound and enduring beauty in simplicity. True simplicity is about bringing order to complexity. Again, my friends, look at these words: simplicity, honesty. These are beautiful words which are not very commonly associated with technology and market, right? But design thinking forces us to bring these ideas into business organizations also. And also, John Ivey's another statement, which I have slightly rephrased: we must innovate by genuinely taking the time, investing the resources, and caring enough to try and make something better. So please look at the underlined words: beauty, simplicity, genuineness, care. Right? So these are all beautiful words that take us beyond business considerations. Normally, when we talk of business, profit, loss, right? But business is far more than that. That is what design thinking asks us to reflect upon. So now, as we have seen these words, empathy is a central factor. Okay? Empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. This is like putting myself in another's shoes. Like, we talked about honesty, simplicity, unobtrusive. So if I have to come up with a product which satisfies those beautiful criteria, then I should be able to put myself in the shoes of a user, consumer, right? See, all of us need not be designers, or all of us are not designers, but all of us are consumers. So if I learn to look from the point of view of the consumer or user of a product, then obviously that is what empathy demands us to do. Then definitely I'll be giving care, right? I will take time. Oh yeah, he's also like me, right? So this is very important. And coming to empathy, there are two types of empathy that can be identified. One is affective empathy, another is cognitive empathy. Affective empathy is when I mirror the, for example, the emotion of someone. can be my loved one or can be anyone. I mirror, or which means I am able to sense, or I myself feel disturbed when someone else feels affected. There is affective empathy. Cognitive empathy is when I am not getting personally affected, but I can sense it. I can understand that cognitively. I can understand. In fact, both are important, right? Both are important for a designer who wants to come up with the great designs. What is the importance? It promotes helping tendency. In fact, organizations, when services or products or anything, we actually we help, right? So when these aspects are built into my organization, the approach of the organization becomes quite phenomenally different, right? And then it is contagious and helps in design and management. Empathy, obviously, design. How does it help? Because I am able to put myself in the shoes of the user of the product. I can see how he or she would, handle, or how or he or she would be able to use the product with ease or whatever. So this is important. So how do we cultivate empathy? Empathy is active listening. We always say listening is a very important ability all of us should cultivate to continue to nourish and nurture. And shared identity, what is that? That's when I make a product, it's not that I'm looking at just selling it, because that buyer may be myself. Can I put myself in the place of the buyer, right? So shared identity, and then listening to other people's views, that can make us empathetic people. So when I'm empathetic, I come up with a product design. Obviously, I'm going to build value into the product by taking into account the very many attributes that we just discussed some time back as being desirable. So now we can gather these ideas and we can list great designs, how they ought to be. Right? Great designs are user-centric, of course, which means useful, understandable, honest, and environment-centric, which means long-lasting and environment-friendly, right? And then design-centric, there is innovation in that. How my product can make business sense only when when it is innovative and thorough, aesthetic, and simple. And of course, profit or value centric, because innovation, just superficial innovation is not going to make lots of money, right? So innovation has to be substantial. So these, attributes I can categorize under three different heads. If you look at user centricity and the environment centricity, they will come under empathy, empathetic outlook of product design, right? As we have discussed. And design centric, that comes under what is possible and whether technology allows that or the process is possible. So this possibility, of course, is an important consideration. And thirdly, business sense, which is also important. So the whole thing, an organization, they should promote a culture where all these aspects of creative designs can be nourished. So based on these ideas, we can deconstruct business innovation. Please remember, sometime back Tim Brennan's that is squiggle. So that is what we have been trying to untangle. We are trying to deconstruct great business innovation. So based on these discussions that we have just had, a possible deconstruction is empathetic consideration of user requirements, brainstorming and listing possible solutions, and selecting solution that makes business sense. Okay. Broadly speaking, these ideas, which we'll be discussing in some detail as we move on. Now, obviously, as we said some few minutes back, a nourishing organizational culture is important to support this process. I will comment a little more on this as we go on. It is these ideas that lead to the concept of design thinking. So we will formally define design thinking as an idea that connects design and business thinking. So according to Wikipedia, the cognitive, strategic, and practical process by which design concepts are developed. That is how Wikipedia defines design thinking. And according to Tim Brown, who is CEO of IDEO, this is a very comprehensive definition. Design thinking uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. This is a wonderfully complete definition of design thinking. So we will, of course, illustrate with a flow diagram and all as we move on. So we mentioned about organizational culture, right? So if you look at usual, I mean, traditional organizations, no, they focus on productivity goals. Okay, so we have an input, then output. So you only consider productivity goals and reward relevant employee behaviors. Whereas a design thinking organization also focuses on culture of the organization, where it is not just the input-output relation that is important. Meaningful employee experience has to be at the center. It is ultimately the employees that come up with the designs, they R&D or whatever it is, right? So meaningful employee experience is placed at the center of a design thinking organization. And the HR focus, human resources focus, shifts from a process developer to experience architect. Very beautiful phrases, right? A process developer to experience architect. I just enjoy beautiful phrases. So reflective measurements here, and I just would like to emphasize this, the reflective measurement. Earlier, I think first slide or somewhere also I said the reflection, process of reflection is very important. So reflective measurements, what that means, I think I will have occasion to just come back to that in a while. So this kind of culture is important to support the process of design thinking. So what kind of characteristics should an individual have in order that he or she can be a design thinker, if we can use that phrase? One is reflection. My friends, my young friends, most of you I guess are young friends, reflection. Reflect why, what is it that I do? Questions like that. And imaginative and positive. It is very important to be positive in life despite the setbacks we face. That is where, that is what life comprises. So we should learn to look at possibilities along with constraints. Usually when we say, okay, can you do that? No, that is not possible. This is not possible, right? We can come up with a number of reasons as to why something cannot be done. It's okay. That still can be realistic, but then we should also look at possibilities, free from constraints, and then bring in constraints, not constraints at the first go itself. And thorough and holistic. Holistic means what? Comprehensive. And does not look for easy and quick solutions. There are no shortcuts for excellence. Okay? So things take time. And persistent and resilient. Persistence, what is the meaning of that? That you sustain with an effort. You don't look, again, no, don't look for quick solutions. You start something, tomorrow I want the results. Today I want the results. Resilient is the ability to bounce back, because all of us, please, my young friends, remember that setbacks are a part of life. They actually, in a sense, they give meaning to life, because when you work to overcome a setback, you learn, you become better, right? So resilience is the ability to bounce back. Not only for individuals, organizations also need this ability to bounce back. And an individual ought to be an accurate self-observer. No, I should know what are my limitations. What is it that I know? What is it that I don't know? What are the limitations of what I know? Right? So these are very important, because if I can be like that, then I can also recognize competence in others, which is also a very important attribute. And obviously, once we have all these, we make good decisions and reflect on how we might do better next time. So when we meet a setback, it is not that everything is gone. There is always a next time, right? So how can we do better, right? So these are the things that we should keep reflecting on. So what is this design thinking approach? I will just, with a flow diagram, I will try to illustrate that. So an opportunity, of course, unless we identify an opportunity, how do we improve it, right? business opportunity or a transformational opportunity, whatever that could be. So opportunity. Then I explore current reality with empathy. We will illustrate with an example shortly. Current reality. This requires qualitative and quantitative information. So what this means, okay, you identify an opportunity for a certain product. Okay, you feel that there is a market for a certain product, then that is the opportunity. And then you explore, so what are the current products, because every service will have some, some products already available. So what are the current products, not only in terms of numbers and all. So how is the user experience, that is their qualitative statement. For example, I think one example I want to take is a student. This is largely academic gathering. I thought that example could be appropriate. Student rating, student give feedbacks on teachers, right? Feedback on teachers. Well, ultimately, that will be a number. Finally, say 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. So, what does that number convey? Actually, it doesn't convey anything, not much. Okay, so okay, something it conveys. But then, on the other hand, you consider a reflective statements by students. For example, a student saying how the teacher impacted her, what difference, how she thought, and all that. When you go through a written statement, that is a reflective statement, it gives far more insights. So numbers are important, but numbers have a limitation, terrific limitation. Whereas qualitative information can be very useful, and design thinking, in my understanding, actually focuses much on the need for qualitative measurements. And brainstorm possibilities, think beyond constraints. See, when you brainstorm possibilities, so what are all the different ways I can come up with a solution? But now constraints should not be imposed, because as I told, if constraints are always in a kind of a rise, then we don't look at possibilities. So brainstorm possibilities, forget about constraints. That is the process of ideation that calls for innovative culture. And then brainstorming, the idea in an organization, the idea can come from one corner of an organization, from an employee who is not in the top echelons of the organization. So brainstorming should involve the larger section of employees, right? And then people will not come up freely with ideas unless the culture, organizational culture, nourishes and promotes that. Will be apprehensive, right? What if I tell something, right? So the culture should nourish a free exchange, free flow of ideas. That is brainstorming. And then you shortlist when you bring in the constraints. When you shortlist, constraints are, of course, constraints are very important in life, and they are a reality in life. Bring in constraint, and then you make final choices and rapid prototype. Why rapid prototype? Because when we talk of business innovations, businesses have constraints. They need to make money because they need to pay salaries to employees, and then a lot of families depend. It's a whole ecosystem, right? So final rapid prototype and test. If there are some weaknesses, go back to the first step or scale up. Okay, so this is broadly the approach to design thinking. And various tools are available for each of the steps, including for brainstorming, such as storytelling and all. We are not going into that. You can just look up and read by yourself. A lot of tools are available. But one thing, just for emphasizing, a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. Quantitative methods, we are all familiar because that's a very commonly employed measure. But qualitative is very important. Qualitative methods only can give insights, not numbers. Okay, so I believe qualitative methods are a key ingredient in design thinking. And obviously, as you would have seen, patience is required in implementing design thinking. As we said earlier, no shortcut for excellence. So actually, all these, several examples we can consider. Organizational transformation. An organization wants to, transform itself from the current state to a much better state. I believe design thinking approach can be employed. And teaching and learning, I think it's a wonderful topic. And technology like gaming, okay, how can you come up with gaming based on empathy? How do you bring in empathy into the design of video games or anything, and cycle for physically challenged? and customer relations. So all these are some examples. So we can look at alumni relations. Why? Because again, I think most of the participants probably from universities and colleges. Therefore, this you will be able to, many of you students also, right? So you might get some ideas from this, and faculty also might get. So this is the approach that we just discussed some time back. So opportunity in this case, when we want to enhance alumni relations, is enhancing alumni relations. That is opportunity, right? Okay, so I want for my organization, I want to enhance alumni connects. So now obviously I take stock of how is it that, how, I mean, what is the current level of engagement? How my alumni as of now, my institute's alumni are currently engaged with the organization. So that is the, current state. And then brainstorm possibilities. There, I look at ways for substantial enhancement of current reality. In this, I should remember that alumni connect. We are not talking of a material connect, because materially or instrumentally, students pay fees, they get degree. That does not establish a connect, right? So it goes beyond this simple, what is it, market relationship. So I should look at okay, strong mentoring. So it calls for this strong alumni relations, call for strong emotional connects between or of the alumni with the institution. That call for strong mentoring, great teaching and learning, support services, and fairness. Do the students believe they were treated fairly and with respect, and things like that? Everything other than the money and material related, which are also important, of course, but such that, so how can I enhance these things so that my graduates, my students remain emotionally connected with my institute? Then I look at uh, list practical implementable actions, and then I implement and assess. But here, improvements I can't see next year itself, right? It takes years for me to see improvements. So this is one example. So with that example, now we will look at some, before concluding, we will look at some aspects of design thinking, because there might be confusion between engineering design and design thinking. Engineering design is a subset of design thinking. Design thinking is a far more comprehensive idea, because an engineering designer, you can be a great designer, but you by yourself cannot ensure business growth. Is it not? It calls for, if I have to come up with a high impact transformational design, it requires more holistic and systematic approach, as we have discussed. That is design thinking. Therefore, this is actually a management subject, not exactly a technical one. And why design thinking? Why is it important, or what is the importance of design thinking? It attempts to give a framework to great business innovations. Okay? Attempts to give, or organizational excellence. Therefore, I believe the idea can help to improve an organization's impact and standing, and which means by extension, it can help with wider presence of organizational excellence. If large number of organizations in our country, for example, try to reflect on design thinking approach, obviously more institutions, better excellence, more excellence becomes more widely prevalent. And there are, of course, some criticisms on design thinking. It is poorly defined. Okay, but then, in my personal opinion, that is the strength of the term also, because anything that can be precisely defined, I think it cannot be a very high quality aspect. I'm not sure. Okay, but reflect on it. For example, quality. Quality is such a common term that we all use, but is it possible to define quality? Have you thought about it? Okay, so you can say a high quality teacher, a high quality restaurant, a high quality singer. That, I'm sure all of us have used phrases like that. But if you try to define, okay, I said someone is a high quality singer, but what do I mean? Can I quantify, or can I qualitatively say something? It gets really challenging. So poorly defined by itself does not mean that that's a weakness. That could be a strength also, and that is the view I hold. And very interesting criticism. It's little more than basic common sense repackaged and marketed for a hefty fee. Of course, these criticisms are from this Harvard Business Review article. Actually, many Harvard Business Review articles are very. I have made good use of them. So please do look at many could be quite useful. And this is very interesting. Actually, I mean, those of you who have done a management course, management, we do goal setting, then planning and strategizing, leading and controlling, and then realizing. More or less, design thinking also follows. Of course, there are some finer aspects included also. A new name for an old method, because there have always been design thinkers and design thinking organizations even before the term was coined. So these are then unsuited to uncertainty. So as we said, there are no shortcuts for excellence. You can't very quickly, and then especially modern dynamics, social and economic dynamics are quite fluid. That's what we see, right, happening. Is design thinking approach quite suited to this kind of uncertainty? According to this article, probably no. So with that, we come to the concluding comments. What are the key features of design thinking? Empathy, very important. Obviously, you would all agree that if all of us could be empathetic, then the difference it can make to our personal and professional lives is enormous, right? And qualitative analysis, my friends, please, take this very, I mean, this is a very key idea. Qualitative, I think institutes can follow this. Qualitative statements. Customer gives a number on 1 to 10 scale, but a customer, even 1 or 2 customers can give a statement about how they found the products. That can be a far more valuable, that can provide insight. And explorative mindset, a mindset that is positive, that looks at possibilities. There is not too much bothered about constraints, but then constraints are important, but then more important are to reflect on the possibilities. And it's important to remember that design thinking approach considers transformative improvements, not incremental. That anyway we might be making incremental improvements. No, transformative improvements. So this approach, I believe, or it is my earnest, desire that many of you who have listened to this talk would have felt that yeah, some of these ideas can help with individual development and therefore institutional developments, because any institution is made up of individuals. When individuals develop, institutions develop, and therefore these ideas can significantly help with nation building. I think with that, I conclude my talk. Thank you for attention.